let you kind of ring the bell when you want me to get started.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We are excited that you're all here today, and I'm actually going to just hand it over to Christina to welcome us. And Michael just named that he's hitting record. So we just want to acknowledge that and offer a moment. If folks feel uncomfortable with that, please throw something into the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to ask for consent to record this meeting for people that can't be with us today, so nobody gets left behind in the conversation. So is that all right with everybody? Thank you. And again, if you are uncomfortable, please feel free to just throw things in the chat. You can do that privately or to the group. All right, Christina, I'm going to hand it to you.
Yay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. In Santa Fe, it's kind of cloudy and windy, so hopefully the weather where you're at is a little more sunny. Before we get started today, we just have some housekeeping items to address to make sure the meeting goes as smoothly as possible. As many of you have already noted, their little chat, as we're a year into Zoom meetings, is a great place for placing questions and also your contact information if you would like to share your email or phone number with other people in the meeting. We also find that using reactions, you'll find the little menu button in the lower portion of your screen for reactions. If you want to applaud someone or send someone some love, or if you have a question, the raise hand function is really great just to be able to flag people who've got something that they might want to interject. And Michael Green is our tech person today, and he will be able to keep an eye on that and make sure that everyone who's got something to say, has got their hand raised, can be addressed and be able to have their say. We do ask that you have your mute button on when you are not speaking. In case of stray phone conversations or barking dogs, which would happen to me because my animals are a little barky. If you're calling in, because a couple of people I noticed that are calling in, things like chat buttons and reactions aren't going to be accessible to you. So, just try to interject when it feels comfortable for you if you have something you need to add. But we do ask that before you start speaking that you say who you are, because we're not going to be able to know what your name is and who you are with just your phone number. So we do ask for that. Do try to keep your video on during the meeting. It's always nice to be able to see people's facial expressions during Zoom calls, just so we know where everyone's kind of comfort level is based upon what they're looking like. And if you can't do that, because not everyone's bandwidth can support that, if you could put a photo of yourself up. If you're not able to do that today, do try to do that tomorrow and Thursday if video is something that you cannot support. And I think that is it. I just want to say thank you all for coming, and I'm really looking forward to the retreat over the next 3 days and sharing what everyone thinks and feels about the project and getting this project, which is really exciting, kicked off on the right foot. So everyone have fun and a good morning, and we shall continue on our way.
Thank you, Christina. And just real quickly, we are going to introduce ourselves, the folks that are your backbone team that have been working to do the preparations for this project launch. So I'm Elena Paisano. I am an enrolled citizen of the San Carlos Apache Nation and a member of the Water Clan from Laguna Pueblo. I'm serving as a project contractor with the NMFMA, and I am the coordinator for our collective effort here. So you'll be seeing a lot from me and hearing a lot from me in my email over the next bit. I'll hand it over to my other backbone team members to do a quick intro.
I'm Christina. I am part of the backbone team, and My main role is to provide facilitation for the evaluation portion of the project in coordination with the university, UNM evaluation lab. And so a lot of the surveys that you've already gotten for the project, I'm the one who's been shuttling those off, and I will be a main portion of the evaluation working team. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Denise Miller, the Executive Director of the NMFMA. I'm also part of the backbone team as the organization that wrote the USDA grant. So part of the group that's just working to pull the pieces together to move the teams along and to move the project along. And I'll be showing up in different places throughout the project as well.
Buenos días y bienvenidos, Juan Abeta, and I'm with the Backbone Support Team. Glad to see all of you here.
Great, thank you all. So we have a challenge today, which is just a quick introduction. I think we all know each other. So as Christina mentioned, we would love for those of you that are value chain coordination entities or all of our transactional partners out there, if you could also just list the community that you're coming from, whether that's what you represent geographically or the food hub you're working with, that will help us understand who's here on the call as we move through content. And just we'll offer a couple of moments for folks to land and do that. So again, if you don't know how to do that, let us know, but you can just adjust your name in the chat box. And we're going to talk a little bit more about project structure as we move through our agenda today. But we did want to offer the opportunity for quick introductions. So I'm going to challenge our support team members. I will call on you if I need to, but to please spend about 30 seconds to a minute giving a quick introduction, however you want to introduce yourself to this team. I want to acknowledge that that is a cumbersome thing, but relationship building is a part of this work. And so we want to allow people to speak for themselves as we start off. So real quickly, we can ask our support team members to unmute. And I will get us started by saying that, Emma, you're the closest little tile to me. So maybe you could get the ball rolling.
Of course. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emma Dewey. I am the farming advisor and the development director at the Center of Southwest Culture. And today I am one of the facilitators with my coworker, Jose Castro Lopez, for the Food Hub Capacity Support Team.
Thanks, Emma. Anyone else support team members before I start calling on you? So thanks, Kendall.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kendall Chavez. I manage the farm to school work, among a handful of other things for the public education department, and really, really thrilled to be here today.
Anyone?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Ortigoza. I am on both video and landline, and so this is me on the phone as well. I was very happy to be here today to learn about the work that's gone into this project and how we can move forward together. I'm the local director for eShip Rio Grande, and we're an entrepreneurial capacity building organization focused on the food and agricultural sector for the state of New Mexico. And as I've mentioned, very happy to learn and to offer what I can to be of support. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos días. My name is Jose Manuel Castro Lopez. I work for Center of Southwest Culture along with Emma, and I'm glad to be here. Good morning, everyone.
All right, I'm gonna start picking you. Pam, you're next in my tile order.
Hi, I'm Pam Roy with Farm to Table, and I help to coordinate the New Mexico Food and Ag Policy Council, and I'm one of your support members. And I think I'll be working with Kendall, her backup. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve, you are the next tile I see.
Okay, so I was just trying to figure out who I am. And I've been trying to figure that out probably most of my life. So do y'all remember Imelda Marcos? She was the wife of Ferdinand Marcos, the dictator of the Philippines for many years. Well, she had a reputation for a closet full of shoes. After the revolution that deposed Marcos, they found her closet full of shoes. And that's me with hats. I have so many hats, I don't even know where to put them anymore. And the one that I've been prominently feeling lately is just a butt-whipped COVID weary farmer. I think I have to admit that over the last year, it's taken a lot out of me, and I'm trying to just keep head above water. And I think so now I can talk about why that happens, which is that since like late 70s, I've probably worked in every food system or food chain job that there is except line chef. And so typically what I bring is this perspective of the continuity of it all out of experience. And even as I've aged, I've refused to drop any of it. And that is just exhausting. So I'm also not the sharpest tool in the shed. So I've got a closet full of hats and a tool shed full of not very sharp tools, but I'm here to offer whatever I can by way of perspective and experience as we look to take our lessons of COVID and help turn them into a better food system for everyone going forward.
Thank you, Steve. Mary and Melissa, you guys are up next for our support team.
I don't know if we can respond in unison, but so I'm Melissa Binder and I'm at the UNM Evaluation Lab here with Mary, who's going to be doing most of the work. I'm just observing today. And we're really excited to be a part of this. It's so cool. Collective impact projects are just so interesting. And this one has such a clear focus. We're really excited to be working on it. And I'll let Mary take it from there.
Hi guys, my name is Mary. I'm a graduate student at UNM and I'm part of the UNM Eval Lab. And I'll be working closely with Christina to get all of our evaluation needs going. So thanks for having me.
Great, thanks guys. Sorry, I'm scanning. Anyone else that's on the support team, if I can't get too quickly, can you please jump in and introduce yourself? Alrighty.
Mike, you're on the support team.
I was just wondering that. So yeah, I believe Michael Vinichinque, New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association, and I believe I will be backing up Steve on the food safety portion.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so now we want to invite all of our partners to do a quick introduction as well. Those of you representing food hubs or producer groups, and if you wouldn't mind, again, just sharing the location you're coming from and who it is that you're representing. And we won't do this every day, we promise. We just want to give that moment for everyone to be able to speak for yourselves. And I'm going to say, Phil, you're my first screen. Sorry to call you out.
Morning, everybody. Phil Britton, Fresh Systems. Was brought in this project via Denise and work I had done with many of you on the Approved Supplier Program. I'm calling in from cold northern Marquette, Michigan.
Thanks, Phil. Continuing, Nina. Hi. Long time no see.
Hi, I'm Nina with Squash Blossom Local Food. I work with farmers throughout northern New Mexico primarily, but open to the whole state. So looking forward to making new friends and relationships in this really power group we've got here. So I'm based in Santa Fe and I'm a distributor to restaurants and the general public. We have a local food subscription service and sell wholesale local food to restaurants in Santa Fe. So thanks for having me. I'm really grateful to be here with you guys.
Thanks, Nina. Valerie and Jennifer, I think we have a couple folks from La Montanita.
Yeah, I'm Valerie Smith from La Montanita. I'm very grateful to work here in the ancestral homes of the Tiwa people. I do food safety training and back up the distribution center folks.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Knapp with La Montanita Co-op Distribution Center. I'm the value chain specialist. We actually supply restaurants, institutions, our stores, other cooperatives, and work with other food hubs all across the state. The only part of the state we don't go to is the eastern part of the state. But yeah, I'm happy to be here and see how we can all work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Helga and Anita, my friends from Agricultura.
Good morning, everyone. Helga Garza, Executive Director of Agricultura Cooperative Network. We are 40 member strong farmer, small farmer. We distribute throughout most of the state of New Mexico and work with governmental, institutional, corporate, and keeping our production local. We are a food hub, we are distributors, we are a farming entity, and work very closely with PED, New Mexico hospitals, various restaurants, food entrepreneurs, and also have a 320 member CSA that we distribute to as well. We are based out of the South Valley at the South Valley Economic Development Center, and we are a GAP certified food hub. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anita Adalja. I'm the Produce and Distribution Manager at Agricultura. I'm also on the board of La Montanita and a farmer myself. Happy to be here.
Thanks. Let's see here. Josh Norman.
Hey, everybody. Josh Norman with Mogro Mobile Grocery, a food hub CSA located in Albuquerque, serving much of northern New Mexico, Santa Fe, Espanola, Pecos, a little bit in Albuquerque. We have a sliding scale CSA. We also act kind of as a food hub, serving tribal communities out in western and northern New Mexico. Really happy to be here and chat with y'all.
Thanks. Adriana, would you mind? Sorry, I saw you were talking. Sorry to do that.
Hi, I'm Adriana Clo. I'm with Desert Spoon Food Hub. We're a food hub in El Paso, Texas, and Las Cruces, primarily serving the southern New Mexico and West Texas region.
Thanks. Edward, Whitney.
Hi, Edward Whitney with New Mexico Harvest. We're a food hub CSA and wholesale distributor, serving northern, central, southern, and soon eastern New Mexico.
Thank you. Bonnie Hopkins.
Good morning. My name is Bonnie Hopkins. I work for New Mexico State University Cooperative Extension as the agriculture agent in San Juan County. So I cover all of San Juan County, including the Navajo Nation.
Thanks. Mario? Uh-oh, Mario, we can't hear your audio. No worries, we'll come back. But I want you to know for the rest of the meeting, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, buenos dias. Mario, Farm Fresh Program Manager at La Semilla Food Center. And we work with 23 farmers and 7 value-added producers. And we are in Anthony, New Mexico. And we serve Doña Ana County and El Paso County.
Thanks, Mario. Kyle?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Malone. I'm with New Mexico Harvest. Like Edward said, we are a CSA food hub. We recently got GAP certified, and our CSA serves about 450 or so members, give or take, every week. And we're just excited to learn more about the value-added chain there.
Thank you. Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin Havens. I'm the project manager for San Juan College Harvest Food Hub, which is in San Juan County. We also have a farm box CSA-like program that we started last year.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Matei, I'm sorry I mispronounced that, I'm sure.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maite Mendoza. I'm the Food and Youth Coordinator at the Anthony Youth Farm in Anthony, New Mexico. And we serve locally schools, CSA boxes, that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Benjamin.
Hey everybody, Ben Rasmussen here from the Southwest New Mexico Food Hub in Silver City. Also with the National Center for Frontier Communities. We're a remote located food hub. We serve schools, restaurants, you know, the works. Starting a CSA here soon. Thank you.
Great, thanks Ben. And Ashley.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I was having some issues with this headset. I'm Ashley Taylor. I am the local food and farming program coordinator with the New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association.
Thanks, Ashley. So we want to acknowledge that we are missing a few folks today. They might join us over the next 3 days. As you all know, it's a 3-day retreat. You're all really busy. So we know people are going to hop in and out of content. We're doing our best to organize things so that you can stay caught up. We'll send follow-up messages, and you all received an agenda attached to your calendar invite. So we'll use that today and take notes in there too. So just a couple housekeeping things to keep people connected. As new folks join us, if we can all just hold each other to the practice of welcoming them in case we don't see the tiles as they add on, just throw it in the chat that we've got new folks. And I'm going to hand it over now to Denise Miller just to share a little bit more about our project and why we are approaching this from a collective impact lens.
Thank you, Elena. And again, hi, everybody. It is truly awesome to see so many people here, even though many of us work together frequently in all different connections. I can't remember seeing really like everyone together like this. So it's very inspiring. I feel like we've got a good chunk of our food value chain here. Of course, it's, you know, not everybody, but that's what we'll be working towards. And so I think, as you all know, this work is happening with the support of the USDA's new Regional Food System Partnership Grant, or RFSP, as you'll see us regularly refer to it. But I know there's also some of us on this call who haven't been as steeped in the background of this grant. So I do want to give you just a little bit more information about the grant itself. We feel really fortunate that last October, we were one of 10 implementation grants that was awarded. And of those 10 collaborators, there was 6.8 million distributed. And we received 1 million of that to be used over the next 3 years. So again, we're feeling really grateful that we get to put those resources towards strengthening the viability and resilience of our regional food economy through collaboration and coordination, which is exactly what the RFSP grant is all about. And that's why it was such a good fit. And even though I just about drove myself crazy writing the grant, it seemed like an important thing for New Mexico based on where I think that we were at as a state, and where so much of our work already is in progress. So in addition to the concrete deliverables for the grant that focus on supporting farmers and food hubs and direct sales and institutional procurement and community food security, this project is also largely about the process of getting there. As you all know, in value chains, relationships are really the central, the key piece of what makes it all work. And that's what made me really think about a collective impact framework. And I have to admit, even though I've read a lot about collective impact, but I had never actually been part of a project. So it's very different to think about something theoretically and then put it in practice. But it seemed like really the perfect framework for enhancing and supporting the amazing relationships that that many or maybe all of our organizations already have with each other, and taking them to a new level. And so before I talk just another couple minutes about collective impact, last night, you know, when I was thinking about the word project versus initiative, because I found myself kind of going back and forth between calling it a project and an initiative, you know, I came to the conclusion that this is probably truly an initiative, a collective impact initiative, because it really is going to be the culmination of many projects that are all coming together that work on several tiers. And so there's the part of it that is addressing the larger vision of New Mexico's local food system. There's also the aspect that is going to be addressing the needs of various stakeholders, as many as we can really include. And then also we're going to be working towards aligning the various segments of our work. And there's a lot of work happening, as we all know, there's a lot of work going on. So it's really an ambitious project. I guess I use the word project and initiative interchangeably, but this will be ambitious. But we have Juan Abeta, who introduced himself before, who is our collective impact consultant. And he is really going to help us steer this ship, because just in the last few months, even that the backbone team has been getting together, I have learned so much. So I want to stress that we're really all going to be learning together. And there's a few things. Juan will be going through the actual, you know, how collective impact works. But I think the things that are most important about why and how we're going to work together is that it relies on dynamic governance or sociocracy, which really is designed to help everyone share power. There is absolutely no top-down structure. Everybody has a voice, and the goal is to be able to channel our passion into outcomes. I know that there's a few people on this call too who have participated in collective impact. So I hope we can, they'll help guide those of us who are newbies. So yep, over the next few days, Juan is going to be teaching us about the structure and the various teams and how they interact. And then we'll begin to practice how to work together within the framework. Collective impact is also important for working towards system change, because not only are we working towards common goals, but we're also going to be using shared measurement systems, which will help us keep our efforts aligned and help us hold partners accountable. Collective impact also requires a lot of communication, and that's really important for building trust. So over the next few days, we'll be talking about some of the tools that we'll be using to help ensure that there's really open communication. And yeah, we're just hoping that, you know, we think it'll probably take a little while, or at least I think it might take a little while for us to get into a rhythm and to figure out how this actually works. But the goal is that we hope this project over the next 3 years, and maybe it will even extend beyond that. You know, the grant is for 3 years, but systems change is really a longer term goal. So we're approaching it, the backbone team is even thinking about this being 10-year work, but the grant project is 3 years. And so we hope that it will help us all break down our silos, identify new opportunities and resources, and find ways to work smarter, not harder, because we are all certainly working really hard. And I think we've just got to find some ways to align our work really, you know, in some new ways. So that's my spiel about why I thought collective impact would be a good idea. And little did I know exactly what we were getting into, but Juan is really skilled at teaching, and he is going to start taking us through and understanding how to do it. So thank you all for being here. And Juan, please take it away.
Thank you, Denise. I'm going to pull up some slides here as I talk. that we'll go through and talk a little bit more about collective impact itself. As Denise mentioned, it is about systems change. And so what we're going to talk about is, I look at the screen here and there's all of these tiles. There's so many of you that are involved in so many different aspects of our food production, from out of the soil and onto the plate. And so if we look at our food supply system, it is an incredibly complex system that has a lot of moving parts and is impacted by everything from the environment to consumer preference. And so there's a lot of different pieces there, and you probably can see where you fit into part of this chain here. But the challenge in a collective impact approach is that you have all these different entities. They all have their own specific goals and what they're trying to accomplish. And so how do you collectively put all of that together so that you can work together? And so that is the challenge of a collective impact approach. And so there's a lot of tools that are used in the process. And the nice thing about collective impact is that it kind of flattens hierarchy. And so that's an important part of it. As Denise mentioned, there's different parts of collective impact initiatives, and there's some characteristics that they all contain. One is a shared vision. And of course, we have that shared vision here. And Steve mentioned earlier wearing a lot of different hats, and he also mentioned what happened now with COVID. And I think whenever we're talking about systems change, it's usually because we want to disrupt the system. We want to change the system. And I think with the pandemic, it's been very clear to a lot of us that there's some system changes that are needed. It exposed, I think, a lot of vulnerabilities. And when there is that kind of awareness, it's a perfect time for change because people are more predisposed to change. If everything's going along fine, there's not a lot of urgency for change. But when things aren't going well, there's more demand and more urgency for change. So having that shared vision of what our food system should look like is going to drive us going forward. A lot of you are involved in different activities and you all have expertise in different areas. And so when we talk about mutually reinforcing activities, that's where we draw upon each of your individual expertise and skills, and we apply those to the whole group. And so we integrate all of your skills and expertise into these activities. There's a support system. We know that all of you are very busy, and we don't want to add additional things to your plate. So there's a backbone team and a support team that will assist in the whole process in terms of moving it forward. And so we're, in a sense, kind of like the background engine that just keeps things running. As Denise mentioned, there's shared measurement, and we're glad to have the UNM evaluation team and Christina from the New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association to head up evaluation. And this is obviously very important because we want to make sure that we are measuring the effects of what we're trying to do. And we build in a number of feedback loops so that we are constantly readjusting and making decisions based on the data. And so that data will guide us in decision-making going forward. As Denise also mentioned, communication is a big part of this. This is a statewide initiative, and it's great to see people from all over the state, from San Juan, from Doña Ana, counties here. And so communication is going to be very important, and there'll be some training later on in this retreat on a platform that we're going to use called Slack. And lastly, I just want to point out that while we all want change and we'd all like it to happen tomorrow, when you're having a large system like this that has been embedded for quite a while, it's going to take a while to make change. We didn't get here overnight, and it's going to take us some time to get out of where we're at now. And so when you're building a new future, there's kind of this commitment to long-term involvement. And so Denise mentioned it's a 3-year grant. However, I think we're laying the foundation here for something that can go on much longer than this. And that commitment to long-term action is what's going to carry us through. So that shared vision, as I mentioned earlier, is what kind of quality of life conditions do we want for our community? And how do we work together so that we integrate all of our experiences, all of our skills, and we build upon successful strategies? So having that shared vision is what's important to drive us. I mentioned the mutually reinforcing activities. And so a lot of that is built on values. And so there's a lot of sharing and alignment of values that we will go through, and a lot of shared experience where we can learn from each other. And again, as I mentioned, we each have our strengths and we each have some challenges. Every organization has some unique skills, but there's also bandwidth issues. Everybody can't do everything. And so we're going to have to rely on each other to do their portion. And so that working together, we'll go through a process of formalizing relationships. There'll be joint projects. Many of you already are engaged in joint projects, but now we're going to try to tie all of those together. As I mentioned, we have the support team. We'll support in terms of, provide support in terms of strategic planning, facilitation of the sessions, technical support, and evaluation will be a big part of what we do to help this project along. Again, I mentioned that what we want to do with shared measurement is really look at how the data validates what we're doing and helps organizations work together to achieve social change. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of different approaches. Some will work and some won't work, and that's fine. You know, we can't be 100% correct all of the time, but we can certainly learn from our mistakes and apply what we learn so that we build better systems. The communication actually takes place at a couple of different levels. There's our internal communication that we will rely on for sharing what we know and having discussions on how we want to go forward. So that really is a little bit more than just communication. It's also about establishing a community of learning. So the purpose of this communication is for us to learn from one another. So we want to have this ongoing dialogue all the time. It's even though we're here for these 3 days, the communication still has to continue afterwards. And so this community of learning is where we really help one another. There's also building awareness in the general broader community. So there's more about public dialogue, and there will be opportunities for advocacy. As we want to change the system, we're going to have to work with other partners, government entities, corporate entities, nonprofit entities, foundations, and others that will assist in the process and hopefully provide, and we'll have to advocate on our behalf of what we want. And hopefully that we raise this awareness that what we're trying to do is for a greater good, and that together with input from the community, we can go through this process. That's very high level kind of orientation. The last that I mentioned was this commitment to long-term process. We are probably somewhere in between phase 1 and phase 2 of this process. And again, we're at the point of establishing trust and some guiding principles. And we're going to practice some of these processes, as Denise mentioned, dynamic governance or sociocracy. A little bit later today, we'll talk a little bit more about the concepts behind that and how that will be implemented in this project. Christina and the UNM Eval Lab are working on the evaluation framework, and we'll have feedback from them as we go forward. And so right now we're in a good shape so that we can actually start talking about strategies for addressing key issues. Over the next couple of days, you're going to break up into small groups, and you're going to have teams, and we'll actually start trying to identify who needs to be on these teams, who needs to be at the table, who needs to be part of the process. And so that's what we hope to accomplish this session. I know that was very quick. I went through it very fast, but what we do now is a thing called a clarification round. And the way this works is I'm going to take any questions you may have about collective impact. And what clarification means is just if you have a question about the process, and we'll go from there. We're not really going to be discussing all the aspects at this point because we don't have time right now. But this, for clarification, if you have any questions, I would suggest you raise your hand on the screen. And if you raise your hand, we will do a round of clarifications. If you don't have any questions, that's fine too. We'll just continue on with our process. So again, if anybody has a question, raise your hand. I'm looking at the screen. If I see any hands raised, I'll try and respond. Normally, we would call upon each person one by one, but because we have over 30 people here, it's going to be a little too lengthy a process. When you break up into the smaller teams, when there's only about 5 or 8 of you or so, we'll go through that process. Okay, one last question, one last check-in. Any questions? Raise your hand. I don't see any. If I missed you, yell out now. Okay, I'll turn it back to you, Elena.
Thank you, Juan. So now I'm going to just give us a little bit of framing for today and for the retreat. So first of all, we have meeting goals for each and every day, and we have 3 goals for this retreat. So first and foremost, today, our goal is to share with you all the basic structure of how this project's going to work and how decisions are going to be made. So we're hoping that when you leave, you have an understanding of the short-term objectives that we're working towards collectively. And again, a little bit more about how this structure will support that. Day 2, we'll be organizing all of you folks into working teams. So we're actually going to get to some work. We're going to have you meet and develop a little bit more of an understanding of the ecosystem that you're working in. So we'll engage in some asset mapping together and other activities. And then day 3, we're going to ask you guys again to meet together. So we want to have this be a constructive use of time, not just full sessions, not conferencey, but really, you know, sleeves up working together. So on day 3, we're going to ask us all to engage in a little bit of initial planning for how the working teams are going to roll out some project work, and we'll give more framing for that as we move along. But again, our goal of this retreat is to orient you all to not only the grant and the objectives within that, but the collective impact process that we're going to be using moving forward. So I'm just going to pause real quickly and also offer an opportunity for clarification if folks need around our goals for this retreat. Okay.
I have a question, Elena. Is that when we're breaking up in those groups or through the whole process, is that where we're like talking about shared values and alignment, or is that, yeah, I guess that's where my question is.
Yeah, so we will address some of that today. Actually, this afternoon, we'll talk about shared values and alignment and how equity, diversity, inclusion, and inclusion need to be incorporated into this work and some of the steps we're taking as a backbone team. And we will also, yes, when we break into those working teams, there'll be more opportunity to really put that into action and into context. So hopefully, Anita, you'll see that in a couple different dynamics throughout our time together this week. Anybody else? Clarifying questions? All righty. So now I wanted to share with you guys, oh, I'm sorry, I hear somebody.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up that as we're starting this collective impact approach, let's not do assumptions, because that can muddy the water. So even in the presentation, there were already some assumptions. And I think that's where the shared values question comes in. So I just want to bring that up from the very beginning as we're building this.
Thanks, Helga. Yeah, I agree. I think the more that we can be intentional and be transparent, again, our goal well, I'll speak for myself, on the Backbone team is to provide direct access for all of you to as much as you can in terms of content, knowledge, and opportunities to impact that. The collective impact process, as both Juan and Denise shared, has some sort of built-in process pieces that can help gut check us along the way. But that is a really critical component and certainly should be addressed from the beginning. So I'm also going to open it up to Juan, if you could reinforce, from what you shared, anything that we need to sort of unpack as embedded assumptions in the framework that we're proposing we all adopt.
Sure thing, and thanks for the question, Elga. Yeah, I think one thing, what I just presented there was a very high level, obviously, overview. And that's just done for the sake of the fact that there's a number of us here. And until we break up into smaller groups, it's going to be a little bit difficult to have discussion. That's one of the disadvantages, I think, of not being together in person. However, throughout the whole process, there's a number of feedback loops, what we call, that where people have the opportunity to present dialogue and engage in dialogue. And so as we go through these steps, the nice thing about using dynamic governance is it's a very inclusive process. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that later this morning. But that inclusivity and making sure that no one organization, no one group, no one person dominates, and that everyone there's an equitable distribution of power through the process and an equitable distribution of discussion time. There's a lot of research that has shown that the most effective organizations or most effective teams are those that engage all of the team members, as opposed to having a team of 10 people and 1 or 2 people kind of dominate. So our goal is to engage everyone in the process and to make sure that everyone, their concerns, their issues are addressed in the process. And so again, when we kind of unpack the dynamic governance process a little bit later, you'll see how that is built in there. But it is important that we all recognize, again, that this is a long-term process and that we will go step by step. The other thing I want to mention is that when you have something this large, people are going to come at it from different perspectives. And I think we have to be willing to engage people with where they're at and then make them understand, or not make them, but allow them the opportunity to understand from our perspective. And so part of this process, as I mentioned earlier, is learning from each other and seeing what results because of that. The dialogue is what's the most important part here. And if we can continue the process of creating a safe environment for that dialogue, then we're doing a good job. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Juan.
Thanks, Juan. Any other clarifications or additions before we dig into the very flat structure and objectives and goals of the project? But I want to just offer a little more space for this conversation. Okay, well, we appreciate you all being here, being committed to this work, and being patient in the process. And I'll just admit with full transparency, this is about learning collectively and consenting to learn in public and what that looks like and feels like. And we're aware that that is how all of you are showing up as well. And so we hope as facilitators that we can create those spaces for productive dialogue and for us to really address some of the root challenges in this work as it appears through our process. So I'm going to flip over to sharing a little bit more about the project itself from a perspective of objectives and goals, and share a little bit more about the structure that we'll be utilizing for this. So I'm going to pull up my screen share real quick here. Sorry, I don't know what is happening. Michael, can you make sure that I've got full screen share? It's like not letting my button. There we go. Never mind. I'm just faster than my computer today. All righty.
Hey, Elena. Anita clarified her question in the chat, so I don't know if you wanted
Oh,
to.
thank you. Yes, let me pull it up. Hey, one of my backbone team colleagues, can you pull it up? It's really hard for me to see the chat and screen share in the same moment.
Sure. Got it right here. Okay, so this is from Anita at Agricultura. Actually, Anita, maybe you would like to, rather than me read it, would you like to read it? There's no reason for me to.
Sure. Yeah, I just didn't want to take up more time. I just kind of thought out my question a little more, but I was curious. And what I typed in there is, are we open to the possibility that our values are not aligned? And what does that mean? But, and also, or is it the goal of this convening to have conversation around aligning our values?
Thank you, Anita. And I'll just jump in. I can't speak for the whole, but I'll jump in from my perspective. I would say that one of the goals of this is to confirm that we're in alignment on our vision for what it is that we're trying to achieve through this collective work. And so that's what you see in front of you. And they are rooted in assumption, you're correct. So these are the three components of vision that we're hoping we can move forward with this project. And then the middle column there, those are the grant objectives. And then the long-term impact that we're hoping to create far over on the right-hand side. So I will name that our shared assumption is that we all agree that these three components on the far right-hand side are what we want to create in New Mexico around the work that we're doing together, so that we want to see New Mexico become a model for value chain coordination, because there's, resilience and real relationships in action here. We want to see communities across the state increase their ability to create change and own that power, and that we address some of the geographic issues of implementation and equity issues that arise in any sort of coordination work across sectors. And then an overarching increase, in access to local food for all community members in New Mexico. So we are, and Juan and Denise and Christina, please jump in here if I'm misspeaking, but I would say we are holding an assumption that we're all working towards that long-term vision of these three goal areas, that we want to see our food system look this way. I think where we might have some misalignment is the little steps along the way. And that's what we're here to hash out and start talking about in a process of how can we move those steps. And so the last thing I'll add before I stop talking is this is a very flexible process. We can, if it's determined that we are not in shared vision, we have an opportunity to pause, step back, and redefine some things. And that's something I really appreciate about the collective impact process. So I'm going to hand it over to any of my other colleagues that want to address that directly.
I think that's well said, Elena, and we do have opportunities and time along the way to look at values in maybe a different, through a different lens and a different way, but I think Elena summed it up from the backbone team's perspective really, really well for right now.
Thanks, Denise. Anita, does that clarify your question? I saw you responded in the chat, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. And again, there's always space to pause. There's always space to move backwards. This is not linear. It's not even backwards, right? It's cyclical. So we just want to acknowledge that. All right. So the objective.
Elena, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but speaking of pauses, I did want to just if we could take a quick minute to welcome a couple of folks who joined us late. And so that's, I can't even scroll through all these people, but Bryce Townsend, I think, has joined us, and Alma Makatiko. So I just want to take a moment to say hello to them officially, and maybe ask them if they could introduce themselves and tell us where they're from and who they work with and what, etc. Just real quickly.
Thanks, Denise. Welcome, Bryce and Alma. Would you mind jumping in? I can't see all the tiles.
Hi, my name is
Hi,
Alma.
good morning.
Please go. Okay, I'll go. My name is Alma Makitiko. Hi, it's really nice to see so many colleagues that have walked with us along the way towards food justice here in our community. My name is Alma Makitiko and I work with Anthony Youth Farm. And I work primarily with in a low-income community. Many of them are first generation and migrant communities in southern New Mexico.
Thank you, Alma. Welcome. And Bryce, if you don't mind.
Yeah, good morning. You know what? I'm going to say this right away. My signal is cutting in and out really bad, so I'm just catching pieces here and there. So I did catch that we're doing like some introductions, but I am from San Felipe Pueblo. I've been growing organic, the variety organic roots and greens here in San Felipe Pueblo for 5 years now, and I've recently started a mentorship program. So I have 3 young farmers here from the tribe, and we're working to just scale up our production of fresh produce, working on getting a 50 package CSA program going here in the Pueblo starting in the middle of May. And then we're also working on a hub center in the town of Bernalillo to serve pueblos in the Sandoval County area, or actually along the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy area. And so recently been elected to the board of directors for the Farmers Marketing, New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association. And then
Oh, Bryce, the connection got you.
and so I'm just interested in working with all of you on this project and see where we can take this food system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just also want to name, as somebody who has internet issues, sometimes it's okay. Don't panic when that happens if you're speaking. The Zoom thing can be pretty high pressure when your internet fails, and it's a windy day around the state. So we will have extra patience, and you kind of rest on our chat box if needed. So Bryce, as you're joining during the day, if there's something you really want to make sure gets across and you're having issues, please use the chat box, and that way we can make sure we're addressing it. All right, so welcome everybody again. Just to land us in what you're looking at, on the far left-hand side, what we're looking at is the proposed actions for this project. So first of all, we really want to cultivate and support a resilient local food value chain ecosystem in the state, so that we can meet the objective of increasing coordination among partners and increasing capacity for partners to be able to share resources, skills and knowledge, creating a real cohesive community here. And the goal of that is so that you're all supported, so that we can be a model for creating value change that are rooted in equity and in community around the country, and really uplift what it is that we do well here. Another strategic action is that we want to generate new and expand existing local food value chains. So again, I'm thrilled that so many of you are on the call representing such diverse regions and communities. The objective there, so again, in the middle here, what you're seeing is the grant objectives. On the far left-hand side is strategic actions we're proposing as a collective, and then the long-term impacts that we're, yes, assuming that we all want to work towards. So we want to see expanded market opportunities and yield. So really creating more of a foothold for local food value chains around the state, and there's numerical things tied to that. And again, that's about changing power. That's about addressing the systemic power dynamics within value chains, and trying to make sure that this addresses all of our geographic communities, and that we are working towards naming and working on issues of equity that arise. The third action is generating cohesive marketing and promotion campaigns. And we want to expand those access points, especially for low-income New Mexicans, recognizing that that's been an area of the program that we all want to focus in on. And the goal there is to increase purchasing of local products, utilizing some of the public support programs that folks have advocated for, and ultimately seeing more local food in communities so that communities are healthier and more vibrant moving forward. So I'm going to offer a clarifying round. I think specifically given Anita's question on those long-term goals. Do those resonate with folks here, or rather, if we are missing something, we're going to, want to address that as we move forward. So I just want to confirm that these 3 long-term objectives we can agree we're working towards. And I'm sorry that the bottom one doesn't display properly. But again, we want to see this as a model. We want to see it working and all of you supported. Communities increasing power to impact those food systems, and overall, generally, we want to see growth in local food consumption, especially for some of our more vulnerable populations.
And the one thing I'd like to add to Elena's presentation there is that, again, as we unpack and do this work, as new understandings arise, we may tweak these, we may amend them, we may alter them to respond to what's happening. So that, again, none of this is cast in stone. This is our initial starting point. And we take off from here and we refine it as we go along, and as we get informed as to which actions work and which actions don't work, we can adjust accordingly. So this is kind of, again, thinking the long-term process of it's a journey, and as we go along the journey, we'll figure out the best route to take.
Thanks, Juan. Yeah, and everything I'm going to share with you today is nothing set in stone. These are all technically working documents. They can be impacted. We control this as a collective. So we want to make sure that it resonates with everybody. And as you learn more about the project, I think hopefully you'll feel like you can contribute more to helping us redefine or reframe any of this. So for those of you that really like logic models, I did put in here the longer version of what I just shared with you, which essentially, this is a working document that we created just to start tracking what it is that we want to be working towards and aid in our evaluation plan. So you'll see this is pretty familiar, but there are inputs and outputs that are named here. Again, it aligns pretty closely to the grant, and we want to acknowledge that there's room for expansion beyond what was committed to in the grant. So this is around cultivating and supporting a resilient local food value chain coordination system. We know that throughout all of these, we're going to be creating baseline data. We want to establish where are we at and make sure that we agree to where we are at before we start attempting to create change and measure change. So that's a common theme you're going to see throughout all of our objectives. You're also going to see that on the inputs, we rest heavily on the working groups. The working groups are all of you. So we think that's the primary component that's going to help define moving forward. And you're also going to see that there's a heavy insertion of metrics and evaluation, right? We really want to ensure that the impact that we're creating is measurable and that it's an agreed standard of measurement amongst the collective. So here we're moving forward to generating new and expanding existing local food value chains. As I mentioned, you'll see a lot of these familiar pieces. Something I want to name that's been added here is looking at the process in which that we do this, and that we want to work towards improving that, decolonizing it, or creating processes that are more inclusive. And so as Juan underscored in his presentation, it's not just where we're going. It's not the objectives and goals only. It's how we get there that matters. And that's why I'm a huge fan of collective impact. Any of you that know me well know that that's always what I get stuck on is process. How can we have equitable outcomes without equitable processes? And so we are here to work on that together. And here is that third bucket. And so again, what we want to be working towards is creating shared tracking systems. So this relates a little bit more to local food outlets and acknowledging that there are gaps in food access, specifically around who we're all able to connect with. And that's going to be a big focus here. And I think where a lot of our work in community and where we're going to rest on all of you. So for the project structure, which Juan and Denise and myself have sort of alluded to this, but here is a graphic that hopefully helps you guys all land into where you fit into the collective impact process. So as we've mentioned, there's a backbone team. The backbone team is responsible for admin, facilitation, support, doing all of the work that allows you guys to show up and use your brains and your hearts and engage. So we are hoping that we're providing that platform for you. It will also look like maintaining steady and consistent communication. That's one of our primary roles as your backbone team, and we have some tools for that. And then, you know, aligning to the grant objectives itself. So when you're working and when we're working collectively, things will expand beyond the grant. We will be bringing it back into that frame as we move forward. We also have a support team. The support team representatives introduced themselves first this morning, and the way that I look at that is that those are systems level partners primarily who are playing a role related to markets or producer capacity that are working at more than one access point or within more than one sector. So there's sort of those representation of the intersections in this work. And I'm not going to list everybody, but we have representatives from different organizations around the state, and they introduced themselves earlier today. We'll have more opportunity to work with the support team as they will be acting as facilitators as we move into the working teams later in the agenda, the next 2 days. Then there's a leadership team, which I'm going to just admit that I certainly don't know enough about. We're really resting on Juan for this one, but there is a formal leadership team. It is one of our goals as we move into the summer to see this actually developed in a more formal way, but there will be direct representation from each one of the teams, the backbone team, support team, and the partners that are in the working teams. And so that process is not going to look top down. Juan's going to share a little bit more about that, and he did this morning, but I just want to acknowledge that we're not there yet today. We haven't allocated that anyone's a leader. It will be a self-selection process, and it will be something that is determined within the decision-making circles. So there's plenty of opportunity for us there to also rethink that. Juan, is there anything you want to add to that? I feel like I did a very poor description of the leadership team.
Yeah, it's still evolving, and as well, a little bit later in the presentation, we'll talk about how that is going to be constructed. So if, yeah, let's just wait till it comes up in the next, I think it's shortly after this, we cover it. Yeah, and so, but I just to let people know that's the ultimate goal, but we're not there yet, selecting people. We still have to actually form the teams and make sure that everyone on the team that is there that needs to be there. So it's a little premature yet, but that's the direction we'll head in, yes.
Thanks, Juan. Yeah, and the function of this leadership team is really going to be to provide that strategy for the overarching project. And so that's why it's so important that it's representative of the whole and that it's well resourced and organized. Then we have all of you that are the value chain coordination partners, and again, boots on the ground, right? And we really want to acknowledge that this work rests on you. If this was a hierarchical chart, you'd be at the top and we would all be the inputs of support. But this is also a growing list. So today, this is who we have on the call. We acknowledge that not everybody is here and there's opportunity for more people to join the initiative. So as we're working, just consider that. But yes, this is representing folks from all around the state that are serving different communities around local food. And then there's the working teams. And again, none of this is set in stone. These are broad categories that you saw if you've reviewed the grant lately or looked at that letter that was named in the grant. And so it is, I would say, a starting point at defining what the working teams might look like. And something that I want to name that we actually just identified this week is the naming of the team Food Access. And it was like, oh, wait, it's not really just food access, right? It's food and nutrition security. And so we might propose shifting some names here, reframing what the working teams look like. And that's why we will engage all of you in some asset mapping to help us really define what that looks like and reconsider how we're organizing into teams to move the work forward. So you're going to hear it over the next 3 days. This is all in process, nothing set in stone. And first, we have to define things and agree to setting them in stone before we can move on to sort of the next phase. So the working teams right now, there are 5: Food Access, New Mexico Grown, which for those of you that aren't involved in New Mexico Grown, that's that public purchasing component and promotion program and incentive program. And then Food Safety, Food Hub Capacity, and Evaluation. And again, these span beyond the grant to the greater whole of our work together. And just real quickly, we'll dig into this a lot more. Oh, I'm sorry, Denise, go ahead, jump in.
Wow, I can't believe you saw me unmute that fast. I just wanted to add a couple of things. And one was that we wanted to acknowledge that that some of the partners in the real world you are both transactional partners. You know, you ring up sales on a, well, not a cash register, but you ring up sales and you provide support. There's, you know, like La Montanita Co-op does a lot in both support type of work as well as you know, a transactional partner. Agricultura is both a support partner in the real world as well as, you know, transactional. Same for La Semilla Food Center. It's really for the purposes of this grant that, you know, if we could have as many people from each of your organizations, and you might decide, you know, maybe down the road, somebody from your organization wants to join the support team, and that would be great. We would love to have that, but it was for the purpose of the grant that we, you know, if one of your primary roles is a transactional partner, that your organization was placed in that bucket. And then I just also want to acknowledge, and it might be something that Elena's about to talk about here, I bet she is actually on this next slide, is that there's a lot of bleed, there's a lot of crossover in terms of the buckets of work. So that's all I'll say right there.
Thanks, Denise. No, that's an important clarification on the support team. Again, if you can just keep in mind that we're toggling the structure of a USDA grant and collective impact. And so there's little ways that that's going to show up throughout. And so the support team, yes, was largely defined at that phase. And again, for those of you that have more than one representative on the call, how it comes to how you actually work in the working teams, you might decide to divide and conquer or to, you know, collectively represent. We're going to leave that up to all of you, and we'll provide a little more guidance moving forward. But as Denise mentioned, these working groups, they're not in isolation either, right? They're mutually dependent. It's an ecosystem, and that's why we really want to use that term, because it is dynamic. There is bleed over, and what we do in one working team impacts another working team. And so part of what we'll do first and foremost in this retreat is confirm that these are indeed the categories that we want to work within. A different person could look at it and organize it totally differently. And so we want to acknowledge that this is just a jumping off point of what we're suggesting. So there's priority topics that were also defined in the grant and defined by a lot of you. We also did send out, if you remember, a partner survey in which that we asked about some of the needs for your organization around capacity. And so all of that is going to inform these working teams. And I think we're going to see the topics certainly reframe and likely grow. So for instance, food access isn't just outlets, marketing, and incentives, and we know that. So we hope that we can build this out to a more robust and realistic structure as we move through the retreat together. And we will revisit this tomorrow in quite a bit of detail. So we're going to talk working teams. We're going to divide up into working teams. And so this will come back. But I want to offer a clarification round for folks around these 5 buckets of working teams. And if that feels good to you today, and understanding that that's a jumping off point, but we can add and revisit moving forward. Valerie, if I could unmute you quickly, I would. Let me find you.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a kind of a question when I look at the people who are here and some of these outcomes, and I see that there are people or organizations that may be competing for some of the same resources. You know, if everybody's buying from the same farmers, unless there's more farm production, then it's further dividing up the same resource, and just thinking about inclusive process as an output. Is that an output or an input, or could you describe how inclusive process is an output instead of an input?
I would say that it's both an input and an output. So we want to see an inclusive process that can be defined and potentially replicated or moved into other areas that we're working together as a result of this project. But as has been named, that needs to start as an input, or else how can we expect those objectives to be grounded in that? So that's my initial response, and I'm going to also offer it to anyone else on the backbone team that wants to address. I'm also going to admit, Valerie, logic models are not my thing. My brain does not work that way. So that question is a hard one for me to grapple with, other than to think, yeah, we need it from the beginning so that it can be an outcome to share in the end. Does that help to clarify at all?
Hey, Elena, I'm not backbone guy, but I had another way of describing that.
Thanks, Steve.
We have to use what we've got. That's why it's an input. We have to do the best we can with what we've got, but we can expect as an output to have learned something and to come out of this process with another way forward. Because process, the process is a thing, right? And it's not going to be the same. I sure don't see how it could be the same after we've all worked together for a while. So that's how it's both an input and an output.
Thank you, Steve. That's beautifully put and very accurate. And some of the things that we're going to do to ensure that it is an output are establishing those baselines and collecting data, qualitative and quantitative, not only from the work that we're trying to do to impact the value chain, but the work we're doing collectively. So we will be collecting those process data input points as well as we move forward. And as Steve said, I have no doubt that what will come out of that will be a shift to process at the very least. It's hard to improve if we don't know what we're doing. And so stepping back and being really intentional at what it looks like as an input and being honest in that so that we can assess our outputs and our gains in the long run. Great. So I'm gonna, anyone else? Sorry, Valerie, it was a hard question for me. All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Juan. He's gonna share a little bit more about collective impact. And I think the more that I will just admit, the more that I learned from Juan about collective impact, the more that I'm able to ground this work into it. So I hope that that offers that for you guys too. Thanks, Juan.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Elga. How many times have we heard that saying? Okay, so I just want to acknowledge Steve mentioned earlier about process. And so this is a big chunk of the process that we're going to talk about, and that's dynamic governance or sociocracy. And that's how we make decisions. And so when there's a group of us like this, I mean, it's a broad group. We all have different perspectives. We have to employ a decision-making process that is kind of built in a way so we don't alienate each other. And so the way you want to do that is you want to make sure that there's inclusivity, that everyone's voice is heard and considered. And one of the things about this whole process is you want to make sure that people understand the needs of others, so that if someone comes in with a specific need or a specific concern, they educate the rest of us as to what that need or concern is, so that we can respond and understand better. So we all have our different perspectives. And so the whole idea behind all of this decision making is that we, again, create this community of learning process. Now, many of you have been involved with a lot of organizations. Many of you have sat on a number of boards. Many of you are part of large organizations. And typically, most of the organizations that the majority of us have been involved in are what we call autocratic organizations, where essentially there's a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is very traditional, is what we call majoritarian rule. And if you've ever sat on a board before or been part of an organization, you can certainly recall everybody saying, all those in favor, say aye, all those opposed, say nay. And so that's the way decisions are made. That is not necessarily the most effective process of making decisions, because the majority rules and the minority's concern may or may not be addressed. It depends on how inclusive the organization is. And so to avoid that, there's a more progressive way of doing this. And this has been around for quite a few decades now, and it's called sociocracy. It's also called dynamic governance. It's also called decision circles. And this is where decisions are made by consent rather than consensus. Consent meaning I can live with that decision and it has addressed all of my concerns. So when we say consensus, that's generally where we are trying to convince people that they want to vote for this particular choice. In other words, you're with consensus, you're saying that you have the right decision to make. But consent is a little bit different, where it says you can live with the decision, that this is something you can support because it has adequately addressed your concerns. And so we are all related in this process because we have a social relationship to agriculture, all of us. And so that is the tie, if you will, that binds us together. And so on the basis of that relationship is how we build our ongoing relationships. And the way we do that is we make sure that when decisions are made, there's no paramount objections. In other words, it's informed consent from all the participants. And if someone has an objection or someone has a concern, they can't just say, oh, that idea stinks. That's a terrible suggestion. That doesn't build trust. And so the way you really do this is say, oh, I have some concerns. My concern is about this or that. So in other words, you explain what your objection is about in the sense of trying to educate others as to what your needs are. And so that sharing of concerns and that sharing of your objection is very important. It's also important to offer an alternative going forward, saying, so because of that, it would be easier for us or for me or for our organization if this was addressed or that was addressed or whatever. So in other words, you also want to not just object, but you also want to provide a path to go forward. And then that's discussed. But basically, you get to the point where decisions, in a sense, are unanimously made because all of the objections have been addressed. And it sounds easy, but the way the process works is to make sure that it's inclusive and equitable. And so the way that works is when there's a topic for discussion, and I'm going to start from the left-hand side here and go across, that's the blue box. You talk about whatever it is, the topic, the task, the proposal that's being considered by your team, and you do something like what we've done today, and that is, first of all, before you actually get into discussion of whether people like it or don't like it or feel it should be changed, you have a clarification round. That's just to make sure that everybody understands what's being discussed. So you're not discussing apples and oranges, we're just discussing oranges. And so the way that works is generally you will have a facilitator, and you're going to see this in your work teams over the next couple of days. You will have a facilitator that will call upon you in rounds. So each person in a team is called upon to give their input. And so we have rounds, and if you don't have anything to add, you can just say pass and you move on. And so the whole idea behind the clarification round is just to make sure everybody understands what's being discussed. There's no discussion or evaluation at that point. After you go through the clarification round, everybody's on board, then you have your discussion rounds. And here's where you actually get to roll up your sleeves and do the work. And again, we go in rounds. This is so important. There's a lot of research that has shown that when groups have equitable time, each team member, they make better decisions than if one or two people dominate the group. So we're going to make sure when we go through these rounds that everyone has the opportunity for their concerns to be addressed. And you go through discussion rounds until everybody's added all their suggestions. And then the facilitator collects and organizes that input. And so that's essentially how the rounds occur. So this goes back to that leadership team question that was raised earlier. So how does this work? So as we mentioned, the whole idea behind dynamic governance is to avoid the top-down kind of hierarchy. And if all of you have seen organizational charts before, when you see organizational charts, you will notice that you usually have your CEO or executive director who is at the top of the chart. Maybe the board of directors is adjacent. And then you have department heads or department managers and et cetera, and it kind of filters down in this very hierarchical process. This in decision circles basically is a more of a flat system. And so as we mentioned earlier, there's these buckets that have been established. And these buckets are just there for now. They can be changed. We can add more buckets. We can take away buckets. That's all up to the group to decide. So again, this is a process. But for right now, we have these 5 buckets that have been established. And over the next couple of days, we're going to work with these buckets, and we may again amend them, or you may amend them. And so the way it works is that each of those teams has a delegate that goes to the leadership team. And the idea behind this is twofold. One is they're bringing the concerns and the information and what that team has been working on to the broader leadership team. And then they are also going backwards in terms of taking to their team what's happening from the other teams. So it's a kind of a two-way communication back and forth. The reason you do this is because, again, as we mentioned, there's a lot of different groups here. There's whatever 30 some people on this call. And so different people have their expertise in different areas, and we're going to tap you for that expertise in whatever way we can. But we want to make sure that your expertise filters to the other groups. I also want to point out, as Denise mentioned earlier, there's a lot of bleed. Just because these circles are there doesn't mean that, that there's not interaction between them. I also want to point out the way that this is set up is it's scalable. So let's just say the food access team, if you look at that circle there, they decide they want to have some subgroups working there. They want to have a subgroup that works with retailers. They want to have a subgroup that works with tribal communities, whatever. You can set up different circles that are then part of that food access team. They too would have individual delegates that serve from their sub team to the food access team. And so you scale this down to the level that you need. The important part about all of this is that the leadership team does not make the decisions. The leadership team there is for accountability, and this is very important. We always think of, oh, leader, they're going to tell us what to do. Actually, in this particular case, the leaders are here for accountability, to make sure that all of the pieces are working together, so that when the food access team has decisions to make within their realm, they make those decisions. When the food safety team has decisions to make, they make those decisions, etc. And so that's the kind of beauty of this, is that decision making is pushed down to the lowest possible level. The people who are impacted are the people making the decision. And so that's the way this works. And that equalizes power and that brings in inclusivity. And so that's the most important part about this whole process, is that we try to make sure that, again, it's not a top-down process, but that everyone is engaged, and in your realm, you're the leader. So that's kind of where we're at this point on dynamic governance. So what I'm going to do now is do a clarification round. And again, if you have a question regarding dynamic governance or decision circles, raise your hand and I'll try and respond to your questions. Anyone?
Hey Juan, I'm curious, from all your experience in this work over the years, have you ever run into a situation where the sort of circles or the hubs or the buckets came up with ideas or initiatives or changes that were in conflict with leadership, and how you mediated that? I don't foresee that happening, but I'm just curious if you've ever experienced that in your work.
Sure. And the way you respond to that is you have to, first of all, understand what the objection is. So if there's a conflict, what is it about? And so the first part is to have dialogue about what that conflict is, so that you have an understanding of what the concern or what the issue is. Once that has been determined and defined, then you look at ways and how do you ameliorate that? How do you come up with a solution that addresses that issue, that addresses that concern, that is still acceptable to everyone else? And so that's the beauty of this, is that over time, you're building, in a sense, a process that everybody can commit to, because they know that in that process, their concerns will be addressed. And that's part of the trust building. This process can seem kind of clunky at first when you keep doing these rounds. It's like, oh, gee, how many times do we have to do this? But in the long run, once people get familiar with it, I have found in different projects I've worked in that it actually becomes kind of normal. And people then don't like actually going back to the other kind of process of majoritarian rule, because while it may seem easy, all those in favor, all those opposed, it really doesn't work best for a collective impact project. The other, Kendall, the other thing is that as we use data, so that if somebody has a concern, hopefully there's some data or something there to help make their argument. So it's not just a it's not just an opinion, but it's an opinion based on data. It's an opinion based on real life experiences. So that's the other thing, is that we try to make these decisions based on input from data and from other individuals. Other questions? Okay, if you do have other clarification questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and I can respond to them there. In the next couple of days, not today, but when we break up into the small groups, we'll actually employ dynamic governance or decision circles into your team, and you'll see how that works. Our support team members have already been trained on this, and so it's a new experience for all of us. We're all learning. Everybody, please be patient, and we'll do the best we can to ensure that everyone's voice is heard. Elena, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Juan. Wow, this is the first time in the history of a call this big that we're ahead of our agenda. So pat on the back, everyone. We hope that there's been enough space for clarifications. We're going to continue to practice that. And then we're going to take a quick break right now. We know that we've all been on a lot of Zoom, and this is something that we've agreed to as a backbone team, is to offer actual breaks. So why don't we do 15 minutes? We say 10 minutes in the agenda, but we have space. Also throughout the agenda, you'll see that there's video links. We're going to provide collective impact videos during our breaks the next 3 days for those of you that want to learn a little bit more. Juan curated them. They're short and they're great, and they will play on a loop during breaks. So don't feel like you have to sit here and wait for the video to come up. It'll play on a loop. So whenever you return with food, coffee, sunshine, it's there for you to learn. And again, you can follow up afterward, and we'll provide some other tools for staying connected to things as well. And so we'll share these videos after the fact. If you need to truly detach from your screen, please do so. So we'll come back at 10 to 11. So at 10:50, we will come back in 15 minutes. And thank you all for your time.
The number and complexity of challenges facing our world can be overwhelming. When individual organizations attempt to tackle the most daunting problems, success stories are all too rare. Many innovative approaches have been tried, too few have worked. However, when organizations work together under the right conditions, they can accomplish great things. One particularly effective means of collaboration is collective impact. Using the collective impact approach, a number of complex social challenges have been addressed and some remarkable results have been achieved. Youth incarcerations dropped by 45% in just 3 years, with no change in public safety, improving the lives of thousands of youths. 6,000 public housing residents were placed in new jobs during the recession. More than 1,000 acres were restored and over 280 million pounds of pollution voluntarily reduced to conserve and restore a river. Organizations utilizing a collective impact approach do the following: agree to a common goal, agree to track progress in the same way, which allows for continuous improvement, do what each does best while identifying new ways to work together, have consistent communication, and finally, have skilled and dedicated resources to support ongoing efforts. The world's toughest challenges aren't going away. In fact, many experts predict they will continue to grow in both number and complexity. Solving these problems requires a range of expertise from a number of diverse organizations. Collective impact is a proven approach, helping organizations work together to move mountains. The number and complexity of challenges facing our world can be overwhelming. When individual organizations attempt to tackle the most daunting problems, success stories are all too rare. Many innovative approaches have been tried, too few have worked. However, when organizations work together under the right conditions, they can accomplish great things. One particularly effective means of collaboration is collective impact. Using the collective impact approach, a number of complex social challenges have been addressed and some remarkable results have been achieved. Youth incarcerations dropped by 45% in just 3 years, with no change in public safety, improving the lives of thousands of youths. 6,000 public housing residents were placed in new jobs during the recession. More than 1,000 acres were restored and over 280 million pounds of pollution voluntarily reduced to conserve and restore a river. Organizations utilizing a collective impact approach do the following: agree to a common goal, agree to track progress in the same way, which allows for continuous improvement, do what each does best while identifying new ways to work together, have consistent communication, and finally, have skilled and dedicated resources to support ongoing efforts. The world's toughest challenges aren't going away. In fact, many experts predict they will continue to grow in both number and complexity. Solving these problems requires a range of expertise from a number of diverse organizations. Collective impact is a proven approach, helping organizations work together to move mountains. The number and complexity of challenges facing our world can be overwhelming. When individual organizations attempt to tackle the most daunting problems, success stories are all too rare. Many innovative approaches have been tried, too few have worked. However, when organizations work together under the right conditions, they can accomplish great things. One particularly effective means of collaboration is collective impact. Using the collective impact approach, a number of complex social challenges have been addressed and some remarkable results have been achieved. Youth incarcerations dropped by 45% in just 3 years, with no change in public safety, improving the lives of thousands of youths. 6,000 public housing residents were placed in new jobs during the recession. More than 1,000 acres were restored and over 280 million pounds of pollution voluntarily reduced to conserve and restore a river. Organizations utilizing a collective impact approach do the following: agree to a common goal, agree to track progress in the same way, which allows for continuous improvement, Do what each does best while identifying new ways to work together. Have consistent communication. And finally, have skilled and dedicated resources to support ongoing efforts. The world's toughest challenges aren't going away. In fact, many experts predict they will continue to grow in both number and complexity. Solving these problems requires a range of expertise from a number of diverse organizations. Collective impact is a proven approach, helping organizations work together to move mountains. The number and complexity of challenges facing our world can be overwhelming. When individual organizations attempt to tackle the most daunting problems, success stories are all too rare. Many innovative approaches have been tried, too few have worked. However, when organizations work together under the right conditions, they can accomplish great things. One particularly effective means of collaboration is collective impact. Using the collective impact approach, a number of complex social challenges have been addressed and some remarkable results have been achieved. Youth incarcerations dropped by 45% in just 3 years, with no change in public safety, improving the lives of thousands of youths. 6,000 public housing residents were placed in new jobs during the recession. More than 1,000 acres were restored and over 280 million pounds of pollution voluntarily reduced to conserve and restore a river. Organizations utilizing a collective impact approach do the following: agree to a common goal, agree to track progress in the same way, which allows for continuous improvement, do what each does best while identifying new ways to work together, have consistent communication, and finally, have skilled and dedicated resources to support ongoing efforts. The world's toughest challenges aren't going away. In fact, many experts predict they will continue to grow in both number and complexity. Solving these problems requires a range of expertise from a number of diverse organizations. Collective impact is a proven approach, helping organizations work together to move mountains. The number and complexity of challenges facing our world can be overwhelming. When individual organizations attempt to tackle the most daunting problems, success stories are all too rare. Many innovative approaches have been tried, too few have worked. However, when organizations work together under the right conditions, they can accomplish great things. One particularly effective means of collaboration is collective impact. Using the collective impact approach, a number of complex social challenges have been addressed and some remarkable results have been achieved. Youth incarcerations dropped by 45% in just 3 years, with no change in public safety, improving the lives of thousands of youths. 6,000 public housing residents were placed in new jobs during the recession. More than 1,000 acres were restored and over 280 million pounds of pollution voluntarily reduced to conserve and restore a river. Organizations utilizing a collective impact approach do the following: agree to a common goal, agree to track progress in the same way, which allows for continuous improvement, do what each does best while identifying new ways to work together, have consistent communication, and finally, have skilled and dedicated resources to support ongoing efforts. The world's toughest challenges aren't going away. In fact, many experts predict they will continue to grow in both number and complexity. Solving these problems requires a range of expertise from a number of diverse organizations. Collective impact is a proven approach, helping organizations work together to move mountains. The number and complexity of challenges facing our world can be overwhelming. When individual organizations attempt to tackle the most daunting problems, success stories are all too rare. Many innovative approaches have been tried, too few have worked. However, when organizations work together under the right conditions, they can accomplish great things. One particularly effective means of collaboration is collective impact. Using the collective impact approach, a number of complex social challenges have been addressed and some remarkable results have been achieved. Youth incarcerations dropped by 45% in just 3 years, with no change in public safety, improving the lives of thousands of youths. 6,000 public housing residents were placed in new jobs during the recession. More than 1,000 acres were restored and over 280 million pounds of pollution voluntarily reduced to conserve and restore a river. Organizations utilizing a collective impact approach do the following: agree to a common goal, agree to track progress in the same way, which allows for continuous improvement, do what each does best while identifying new ways to work together, have consistent communication, and finally, have skilled and dedicated resources to support ongoing efforts. The world's toughest challenges aren't going away. In fact, many experts predict they will continue to grow in both number and complexity. Solving these problems requires a range of expertise from a number of diverse organizations. Collective impact is a proven approach, helping organizations work together to move mountains.
Hey folks, as you come back in, turn your screens on if you'd like to. I know some of us are eating. Kendall, thanks for being brave. I was like about to just start eating ferociously. So yeah. Welcome back, folks. I hope you found that video helpful. I know like it's now ingrained in my brain as a loop because I was in the same room as it. But I think the little snippets are really helpful. Thanks, Juan. All right. Folks, if you don't want to turn your camera on, that's fine. Just let us know you're here. Maybe throw a thumbs up in your box or something. Thank you. All right, we're ready to go ahead and start getting started. Juan, I'm going to hand it to you just for a moment to help us with the transition, if you wouldn't mind. Tomorrow, we're gonna step more into, as Juan said, practicing some of those components of dynamic governance that he shared with us today. And we're also going to do our very best to do that throughout. So thank you for those of you that have been stepping up to throw clarification questions out there into the dialogue. That's really important. And we want to make sure that you all feel like this is a space for that.
All right, everyone, welcome back. And as Elena mentioned, there are questions that are popping up in the chat, so feel free to, if you have questions, to place them in there, and we'll try and respond as quickly as we can. One question was about the use of dynamic governance and settings outside of collective impact, and yes, they're actually used in a wide variety of settings. I've used it with nonprofits, with housing associations, with food cooperatives. So dynamic governance lends itself actually quite well to different settings and can be used with any scale of organization, from large to small. It's used in some large corporations, and it's used in, like I said, neighborhood associations. So it has a lot of applications. Before we move forward, I just want to check in with everyone. So far, the first session, or the first part of this session, has just been trying to present a very high level overview of the project without really stepping into the weeds or getting into details, which is what we intend to do over the next couple of days. And also just to introduce the concepts of both collective impact and dynamic governance. But before we move forward to the next session, which is going to talk a little bit more about diversity, equity, and inclusion, before we go further, I just want to make sure that everyone feels they have enough information to move forward in terms of just the high level, again, high level, where I know you may have a lot of specific questions about each individual team. We will have time to get into those when we actually break up into the teams. But just at the high level area, does anybody need any more additional clarification? If you do, please signal by raising your hand or chiming in if you're on the phone and can't raise your hand. Now's the time to pop that question to the whole group. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so let's try this. If everybody feels they're ready to move on, give me a thumbs up if you feel you're ready to move on to the next session. It looks like a lot of thumbs up, so great. So I think we're ready to go, Elena. You're on again for the next portion.
Thanks, Juan. And yeah, again, thank you all for being patient. This is a really challenging process to do on these little screens. And I think we've been prepping for it and talking about the differences in communication on the screen. And I'm going to practice something Juan shared and we talked about with our support team, which is stepping back a little further so that we can see body language. We're full people, not just heads, little things like that. So we're all going to practice trying to relationship build over Zoom as much as we can. So I am here to share a little bit more, some food for thought. I wanted to address the fact that there's issues of equity embedded automatically when we start doing coalition work, especially work that spans sectors, geographies, and just the diversity of this group as with any. And so I'm still learning like all of you, but I wanted to share some learnings that I have had in my work at the national level in working with coalitions around addressing white supremacy and how it arises, and some alternatives for frameworks that we can consider as we move this work forward. And again, I feel like we are already leaps and bounds ahead just by having adopted a collective impact process and having Juan here to help shepherd us through it. But I wanted to just offer a little bit of framing for all of us. And it's something that we realize is going to be embedded in this project. And there's a few different ways that we're going to address and make sure that we're building our literacy around equity in food systems work. So first and foremost, we want to name that we know there are going to be training needs so that we can all have these conversations in a productive way. right? We all come to this in a different way. Our professional and personal paths have given us gifts that we all can bring, but not everyone's at the same place right now. And so we will be providing opportunities for training and skill building, not only around equity, but around facilitation, team building, all of those pieces. As Juan said, that's part of the backbone team. So today I'm not attempting to do any sort of large scale training, but rather just provide a framework for where we're headed and some food for thought for a conversation that we can all have around our future moving forward. So let me pull up. Alrighty. So first and foremost, because we're entering into territory that is personal, it just is, there's some community agreements that I want to propose to this group as we move forward in dialogue this afternoon. Please, I know a lot of us are experienced in this space, and so if you have something to add in terms of a community agreement for this dialogue, drop it in the chat box. We will harvest those after our call as well. We acknowledge that we need to address what Anita mentioned around shared values, and that is part of this collective process. So this is like a jumping off point that I'm offering. So first and foremost, speaking from the I, so trying to make sure that we're only representing ourselves in the conversation. Assuming good intent of one another. Everyone has done that today just by being here, and thank you for that. Stepping up and stepping back. I have a lot to practice on that one, so I'll just admit it. Define what you need. So speaking clearly, allowing the space and time to be heard. Practicing self-care. Please, throughout our 3 days together, feel free to turn your screen off, do what you need, take care of yourself, address your children, your pets, your plants. We're all whole people here. And then be mindful of the fixing impulse. That's one that I really like. I think it shows up a lot in our work and something to be always holding, and to listen for understanding and practice compassionate listening. Any additions that anyone wants to offer either via chat or verbally at this time? Alrighty. So we wanted to start first by saying that we sent out a partner survey, thanks to those of you that completed it. Part of the questions there were around assessing capacity and skills within this network to do the work that we're doing around local food systems and value chains, but we also want to learn from all of you the skills that you have to contribute around diversity, equity, and inclusion in this work. I know a lot of you have been in trainings, maybe developed or led workshops, have some tools that you like to use, or found resources that can continue this type of learning. So whether that's monetary resources or great trainers you know of. So we just wanted to open by offering a community poll. If you could answer in the chat box what skills you have to contribute to this group. If one of you happens to be an experienced anti-racism trainer, we want to know that right up front so that we can uplift the expertise that we have in this group. So I'm going to offer just a few minutes for folks to chime in the chat, and I would like you to also consider that anything you have to add is a valuable contribution. We all have lived experience around this as well. So I'll just pause and allow us all a moment to respond in the chat to this poll. So I'm also going to admit it's hard for me to watch the chat, your faces, and this screen, and I'm going to prioritize your faces. Thank you, Christina. So as we move through the presentation, drop them in there. Again, we're going to harvest this afterwards, so don't feel like time is the consideration here. Thank you all. All right, so first and foremost, this picture is probably familiar to a lot of you, and you probably just want to rip it off your screen, because I know I've seen this picture about 5,000 times, but it's an important landing in what are we talking about when we mean equity. And the reality, I like this one because it has this addition of reality where we're at today as a society, and recognizing that we are so far from equality, let alone equity. However, what gives me faith in this work is local food system work is rooted in this intention of creating at least more equality in the systems, if not working towards equity for all. So I'm gonna actually offer it to the group because I think we all have expertise in this space, but if there's a void, I will fill it. So would someone like to explain equality? that would like to jump in? Anyone from the backbone team or support team? Anyone that feels like they can do it very quickly?
A uniform approach to equal resources for all.
Thanks, Kendall. So yeah, everybody's resourced the same. Everybody gets their piece of the pie, and that is fair. Fair is the prime word there, I think, that people like to rest on. As compared to equity, does anyone want to take a stab at that? What does equity look like in practice? I'll take a stab at it since I'm the one holding the space. So equity looks like acknowledging our differences and understanding that tools and resources need to be allocated in which not to level the playing field, but to allow us all to interact in the same way in the playing field. So it's a false reality that we're all going to be equal players, right? These folks are still not able to see over that fence on their little boxes when they're given the same boxes. But equity acknowledges historical truths that have been designed by the systems that we uphold to keep certain people lower than others. And so an equity approach is not creating equal access for all, it is creating access for some that is greater than others in an attempt to address historical and ongoing oppression. And I think that's an area that people get caught a lot, of trying to create equality. And again, reinforcing equity is not the same, creating the same for everybody, but acknowledging how people show up and resourcing them so that they have the same relative power to impact change. And then this graphic also has liberation or freedom or justice, however you want to name that. And that looks like breaking down those barriers completely, right? Removing the fence. Instead of trying to prop each other up with tools to overcome the system that keeps us oppressed, it's actually changing the very system itself or removing that fence in the first place. So it is transformative in nature. We're not just improving on the system that exists, but we're actually totally transforming it, or in this case, rebuilding or demolishing. Now, offer an opportunity for clarifying questions or anything that anybody wants to add to mine. Alma.
I just wanted to say that in the liberation chart, it's also a very self-reflective process in which those of us who have more privilege or are farther away from the systems of oppression have greater responsibility in terms of removing the barriers for other people to really access justice.
Thank you, Alma. Anybody else want to add something to that? Great. As things come up, and I gotta say, I had no idea that when you raise your hand, you pop to the front tile no matter what. So that's a great tool. If you really want to be heard, use the raise hand function, because Alma just popped up right there, front and center. Great. So I'm going to start by naming it. What we're talking about here is racism, and there are principles to anti-racism. Whether we want to go, I'm not going to go into the historics of how the work that we're doing addresses racism. I think we all know that, but there are 4 principles of anti-racism that I want to bring forward as we consider. So 1, racism is real. And not only is it real, but it is everywhere. It is something that it has its own momentum, and you cannot avoid it. Racism is a system with power and control at its roots. So it's not just accidental. This is structured, this is systemic, and this has been created, which is why we must all work to deconstruct the system that does this. Racism saps the energy of the whole society. So we are all impacted by racism differently, no doubt, but we all are. It's all a part of how we function in this society. And we all can act, and I would say need to act, to dismantle racism. There's not one person in this space that can't do something. We all have the capacity to create that change. Some more truths in this work. Everything that we do does exist within a cultural context, and I'll just speak from the I here. For me, this is specifically true with food and why I love this work, and I think it brings us all together, and it's deeply rooted in culture and place and community. Being culturally competent is a process, and it's social and emotional, as well as creating new cultures that uplift that sort of process. Being aware of our own personal bias is the first key step in this work, right? We can't dismantle the things that are out there if we're not doing the work within ourselves. And then acknowledging that this work is messy. It will not be easily done. There will be toes stepped on. There will be feelings hurt. There will be moments of conflict. And that is why we are a collective, so that we can address that and move through it. And again, I'm really honored because I know a lot of you from historic work, we've been in it for a long time. We're still here despite this. And so it will keep happening. Models sometimes can work to promote stereotyping. And so just being conscious of what we're talking about, replicating things, scaling things. Stereotyping is also a natural part of what humans do. We try to categorize things, create patterns and norms. I have a 3-year-old. I'm watching her do this all the time in her brain, right? Like trying to associate cause and effect. So it's a human behavior. Again, we all have a role to play, and there's nobody here that is personally to blame or personally responsible for the systems operating the way that they do at this point in time. So I'm going to pause and ask if anybody wants to add any other truths that we want to just hold in this space as we move forward. Okay. Great. And something that I like to employ, and actually I learned from Tanya Leveta when I was first coming up in this work, is holding those awkward pauses just a little bit longer than it feels awkward. So please acknowledge that that is intentional. I know it's kind of weird, but I feel like sometimes people are able to fill that space where they wouldn't otherwise. Alrighty. So what we're talking about today is, here's another truth. White supremacy is adopted by coalition structures. It just is, unless we're intentionally working to dismantle that. And here's some ways in which that we see that show up when we're working together. So a focus on perfectionism, right? For today's meeting, for instance, we wanted to make sure that everything was functioning so that you guys could all come in and feel ready to hit the ground. The difference is we were doing that so that we could create an equal platform, not just to dot all the I's and cross the T's, but it's something that shows up in our work, and especially this food system work, perfectionism. A sense of urgency, whether it be false or real, but for that to be the priority. And that's, again, something I really respect about this collective impact process, is it just completely levels that concept, because as we said, we have a 3-year grant, but we have no illusion that this work will be done in 3 years. Defensiveness and denial are characteristics that come up in group dynamics when it's rooted in white supremacy. We also see paternalism and saviorism, and I think a lot of us, having worked in these nonprofit structures and community-based structures for a long time, are probably pretty familiar with saviorism and how it shows up and how it can be damaging to a collective process when we're trying to jump in and fix something instead of allowing it to emerge in its fullness. We remove other people's opportunity to act on their own behalf. And then a fear of open conflict, right? Like, let's just avoid at all causes the elephant in the room. That goes right alongside this right to be comfortable. So again, this work is hard. It will not be comfortable. There will be conflict. And that is reality in our authentic relationships. And so we don't want to shy away from that. Instead, we want to find tools and processes that'll allow us to address the conflict and to work through it in a way that's collective. And what I loved about what Juan shares that echoes in my brain is it's about, can I live with that? Right? It's not like, hey, this is great, we all voted and it's equal, but it's really a deep consideration of, can I sit here in this space and still hold you all in the same way, knowing this thing that I've agreed to in our non-consensus space. And then either or thinking. So this is the solution, or else there isn't one, or else it means starting all over, right? That's pretty destructive in group structures. And then prioritizing productivity over relationships, which that's where not only the self-care component comes in, but our care for each other and understanding that building our relationships, tending those relationships takes time and energy. They don't just grow and stay strong automatically because we have maybe shared values, maybe shared goals. We actually have to invest in our relationships together. And so here is another look at this and kind of a 500-foot view. So a colonized approach, or approach that does embed white supremacy in coalition work, might prioritize things like individualism over collectivism. So what can I gain? How can I push my agenda and utilize the power of the group? It might force assimilation as a way of being. So, oh, in order to play in this sandbox, I better do it this way, or else they might not allow me to contribute, versus being inclusive of alternative ways of thinking, being, and approaching the work. Prioritizing intellect and those kind of tangible or Western ways of knowing versus emotional knowing and expression. And action, being action-oriented, which I'll admit, this is one I have a little bit of a challenge with, because when we're doing collective work, we want to root in actions so that we're all contributing to something that feels concrete, we can see it move, that feels like respect. However, when we do that over acknowledging process needs, then we're not aiming towards transformation, just transaction. And then timeliness, really prioritizing timeliness deadlines over emergent needs. So in this work, again, with collective impact, there will be emergent needs. We might come out of this and decide that those 5 working groups we propose are not the right working groups at all. We need to rebrand them and we need to have new topics, and that's okay. This process is going to allow for that. And that this isn't linear. It's not A to B to C or else moving backwards, it's actually cyclical. So we might find ourselves making gains and then returning back to that, and that's a natural part of the process, not a failure of our collective work together. And so what I wanted to share today, and again, this is initial thinking, and I'll be honest, it's me sitting in front of my computer in a vacuum. So it's not even initial collective thinking, but what is it that we are offering in this project that helps move us towards a dismantled or a decolonized collective approach compared to one that's rooted in white supremacy? So we have a commitment to transparency in this work. So you guys will have access to everything we have access to in terms of files, grant narratives, decisions around funding, all of that. It is 100% our job as your backbone team to make sure you can access those resources. And if you can't access them in the ways we've defined, we will work with you individually to make sure you can. So if you're someone that needs a phone call, tell us that. If you're someone that won't pick up the phone no matter what, tell us that, right? We want to meet you where you're at. We are prioritizing direct representation as much as we can in this work. That's why you're all here representing the communities that you serve. And we encourage you to consider in these conversations over the next few days, who else you might bring in, or who else might be a better fit if that's what you conclude. Just knowing that each one of us has multiple people we're working with, and this is a space for them as well. And then a commitment to maintaining work-life balance. So breaks, as well as offering ways for you guys to stay in communication that are hopefully a little bit easier than your traditional ways. So one tool that we're going to be using is Slack as a platform. It's really well optimized for mobile use. So for those of you that are in the field and don't often have time to sit at your computer, it actually works, I think, better over your cell phone. So there's little ways that we're trying to adopt this. And then we want to address power dynamics, and that's where, as Juan shared, sociocracy as our structure is going to help us do that, and allowing folks to operate with autonomy and in smaller circles so that we're not recreating hierarchies. And then naming time oppression. Again, 3-year grant. We know it's going to take more than 3 years. So that's a whole piece of this work that we're holding in truth and acknowledging as we build. Time might change, and there's very different ways of looking at time and change, especially around this work that's rooted in community. And so some tools that we have to hold us to those principles, as I mentioned, we're going to be using Slack as one of our primary communication platforms. Just real quickly, can you give me like a thumbs up, either a real one or in the box if you've used Slack, if you're comfortable with it? See if you see a definite no. Okay, so I'm going to say that the majority of us has some Slack learning to do, and that's fine. We're going to provide that training. You'll have access to Slack. We'll provide training and workshops for it. Think of it as email meets Google Drive meets instant message. So what's cool about it is you don't have to take the time to craft the perfect email to talk to everybody, right? I can just say, hey, Denise, I have a quick question for you. Also, you guys can see any conversation that other people are having. So it really promotes that transparency of communication. And we can link in documents. So all these documents in our agenda can be linked through Slack. So if you find yourself in the car and having a moment to dig into this work, hopefully it's achievable for you. So we'll talk about some of the ways that Slack can be a really good tool for this collective work. We also are going to be holding regular office hours, quote unquote virtual office hours. So starting tomorrow, actually at 3 o'clock when we wrap, will be our first virtual office hour offering. Every week we will have an hour in which that you guys can come on to a Zoom call where the Backbone team is meeting, or 1 or 2 of us. If you just have a question or a concern, or you're like, ooh, that didn't feel good, I had this weird conversation and I didn't like it, anything like that. We just want to allow time and space for those organic conversations instead of creating constraints by having to schedule. With a group this big, it can be pretty hard. And then we also are going to offer an online suggestion box via Slack. So if you just have needs as they emerge, hopefully you can share those and feel like they are received. And then as Juan mentioned, and as we will continue to work on process. So we feel like the collective impact process is in and of itself a tool. So dynamic governance and decision-making circles, which we'll talk more about in practice, are tools for dismantling some of the hierarchies that we're used to working in. And then organization, we are proposing that we will, well, not proposing, we will have standing meeting times. So you guys will be able to predict and plan for your engagement in this work. We're not going to throw requests at you overnight. You will have that time and space, and you will help us construct that schedule. So that's part of one of the outcomes of this retreat, is to have a master calendar in which that you can see, this is when the working groups are meeting. If I want to join in, I can do that. And then also when all of our regular full network meetings will be again. So you can plan your life around it. And we want to acknowledge that balance is needed. And then, sorry, my little box. Next steps that I'm proposing, and what I really want to offer to this group as a conversation, that a dialogue opportunity, is what do we need as tools in this collective to be able to hold ourselves to some principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and really to a decolonized process. And so we've already identified the need for shared language. It's a core principle of collective impact. It's also just practical, right? So we're starting to draft a glossary. We all come to the work in different ways. I might know 20 acronyms that you don't know, and vice versa. So we want to have a space via Slack, we'll start that, of a shared glossary of terms. And we're going to ask all of you to co-construct that with us so that nobody is feeling unable to participate because of a lack of language knowledge, essentially. I am proposing that we adopt community agreements or community values that help guide us in this work, that we can hold each other to, both in this whole network collective, but within the working groups as well. So when you're doing the work in smaller groups, you feel comfortable that you can ground us back in the whole of the project. And then, as I said, we're creating a master calendar that will help all of you to be able to access all the information that you need and participate and provide input in all of the working groups you'd like to. And then we will also be working on formalizing our leadership team structure, which will help to facilitate that direct representation from the working groups and from the organizations you guys are working with. So I'm going to pause because I just threw a lot out there. And for some of you, it's probably familiar. For others, you might be sitting with it. So I just want to offer an opportunity for a response round. And so as Juan's been teaching us, there's a few different ways of getting input. So a response round, which is an opportunity for you to just respond to anything that's been said. We'll offer clarification rounds, which is that I have a very particular question about something that was said. And then down the line, we'll practice making dialogues for decision making. So I'm going to pause here and offer an opportunity for clarification round or a response round. Valerie, thank you for raising your hand.
Did I understand you to express some intent to locate and make available equity training?
Yeah, and so that's something that as a backbone team, we've already identified the need for equity training at all levels. And so that's where we want to know from within this group who has skills to contribute. It's better if it's born from home, and we know that. And then we will line up trainings that meet the capacity needs of the group. Yes. Anyone else? Clarifying question or response? Juan, I'm going to call on you.
Sure, I just want to emphasize the transparency aspect of the project and the fact that we want your input. If you have concerns, if you have issues that you want to raise, great. But we don't know about them unless you raise them and bring it to our attention. So I would suggest definitely using the decision circles as a way of directly making your needs to your team known. But I would also say, you know, the office hours and the online suggestion box, we're available at any point to answer questions that you feel you may have. And so please feel free to engage us.
Thanks, Juan. And I would add that not only do we want your input, we're actually depending on it. Everything we're doing is based upon your work, your input, really. Like, we're the facilitators of this work, but we're in no way here to define the agenda or shape what it is moving forward. We're facilitators in the process. I'll speak for myself as the project coordinator. So we're reliant on your input and your authentic input into this process. Anita.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of this. I just, I guess I wanted to add, just from what I'm feeling, is that it's asking us all to be really brave and really vulnerable. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate that. A lot of the discussions that we have at Agricultura and we have with our partners are not easy to have, and they're stressful, they're scary, but they're so important. So I really appreciate, you know, everything that you've gone through, Elena, and having this space for it. And yeah, just acknowledging that it's really scary and really hard, but so necessary and really important. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Anita. Yes, we're asking all of you to be brave, and that's another way of demonstrating that commitment in this collective work. And I also want to acknowledge that some of us have different levels of ability to show up in this space, and our hope, this is part of the capacity building. So going back to Valerie's question, there will be training. We hope that coming out of this, all of you feel more equipped to have these conversations in your work and in your circles that are related to this, but not directly within, so that you can help bring these dialogues to a more normal way of doing the work. Valerie, I can't tell if your hand is still up or if you're, sorry. No, by your face, I can tell it's just still up. Anybody else, anything that you'd like to add, either a clarifying question to anything I presented or just a response that you want to provide to the group?
I don't know if this word or concept has come up or repeatedly, but in the trainings I've had, almost everything that we covered landed on mindfulness and empathy as kind of underlying foundational abilities or capacities that sort of helped moderate the really legitimate fears that we bring and the sort of stereotypes and stuff. They were like put forward as pieces of how change happens. And I just want to mention those in case they hadn't specifically been mentioned.
Great.
Um,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to also bring up that this is not all new in approaching this. These are pieces that we've been voicing along the way throughout the value food chain, working on procurement policy changes and working collectively. And so we're not approaching this new. We just haven't been successful in really getting into the nitty-gritty of differences. So the challenges are ahead of us as we come together in this collective impact approach. But there's going to be many challenges along the way. And I'm glad that you all have put some of those safety nets in the process, such as the hour-long check-ins where people may not feel comfortable in the group collective, but can also have that space to speak on a one-to-one with, you know, the backbone folk or but I do want to acknowledge that we have been trying to have these conversations and we're thinking we're in a safe place because we're all working on different aspects of the value food chain in the state of New Mexico. So I just wanted to bring that up because it is we're talking about process. It has been part of the process that we've been trying to achieve here. And it has been very challenging. And a lot of times, and I will speak from the I and the we of Agricultura Network, we've been trying to lead some of these conversations. We've been trying to address issues in equity, and we haven't been supported in a good way. So I do want to acknowledge that in this process.
Thank you, Helga. Sorry, I was toggling to make sure you went back mute in case I didn't want to interrupt a pause. We're all entitled to a pause. Yes, and it's actually something that we were just discussing. I have a response to that, which is we were talking about that and that, you know, in the collective impact process, I guess that's one of those shared understandings is an agreement to acknowledging where we've been at and then rooting our solutions in future thinking or forward thinking. And so it's a commitment to looking forward and yes, learning from the past, but being able to recognize that how we put into action moving forward in this process is what's most critical. And Juan, I don't think I summed that up the best. The other day you said it very eloquently. I can't remember it, but essentially, right, that commitment to move forward. And I think that's true anytime we're doing this work in relationship, whether it's to 50 people or to one person or 3 people in our family. And so, yeah.
Yeah, the way I like to look at this is that this is a journey. You know, a lot of people, when they have a project and there's goals and objectives and they kind of see like this quote end point and it's a destination that you get to. I think when we're talking about systems like this, it's not a destination, but it's a journey and there's many paths. And I think the important thing is we have to be open. I know for many of us that have worked in these areas for a long time, we have a lot of passion about what we want to see happening and what we want to see occur. And we also have to recognize that other people have similar passions and they want to see it, but maybe a little bit different. And so, again, I think the important part here is that there's many paths going forward and we just have to be open to exploring those together.
Thanks, Juan. Anyone else, any clarifications on any of the offerings that are here or any response?
Elena, I'm just, this isn't like a fully formed question, but I'm just thinking and curious about how this group will be messaging. I'm just thinking about all that's been shared, how we're going to message, and especially what Elga just shared, how this work is going to be messaged externally. So that's really important too, right? So are we talking about this as an NMFMA-led initiative with partners, or like what does that look like in terms of how we communicate this work? Because it is so tethered to all of the historical work and all of the wisdom and knowledge of these partners. And so I'm just curious if you can speak to that.
It's a really good question, Kendall. I'm going to underscore that, yes, and anyone else, we're all here. So if anyone else wants to speak to that, I'm going to underscore that, yeah, the external messaging is critical, and how we represent the fullness of this group, as well as the roots in which that we're standing upon, right? Like we are standing on a foundation of great work that's already happened. And so how are we going to do that? And I can say that I don't have an answer today, except that it's within the working groups. No, we're not going to make that unilateral decision as the backbone team. I don't know where it's going to fit in the working groups. I would assume each and every group, we're going to need to consider this. What are the statements that we're putting out there, and how do we share the values of our groups? And then the other piece is that we also ran in, oh, this is kind of a tangential thought, sorry, similar line of thinking. We were talking about, how are we going to ensure that equity, diversity, inclusion are parts of this process? So we had a moment where we're like, oh, does there need to be a working group? And then we're like, well, no, because that disassociates it from the whole. So it needs to be embedded in everything that we're doing. And so to me, Kendall, this is one of those tough problems along the same lines, where we could say, oh, let's make a group, but each and every one of us needs to be a part of that messaging, and then committing to spreading that message in a unified way, while allowing the diversity of our organizations to represent as well. So it's going to be a challenge. I'm going to offer that if anyone else has anything to add from the backbone team or otherwise.
Yeah, I'd like to hear Denise comment on Kendall's question.
Perfect. I was just trying to raise my hand, but I'm not very quick at raising or lowering my hand. So yeah, I think it's a really good question. And from the NMFMA's perspective, I am not attached to, I see this as a collective impact initiative, which means it is everybody involved in the initiative. And yes, the NMFMA is a grant holder. That's just a fact of the project, but that is that is in the background. That is, if somebody needs to know something, or, where it's, I guess it depends on with messaging, right? It always depends on what is the communication vehicle and what. So if it's somewhere where it needs to be mentioned that there is a USDA grant involved, then, and it's appropriate to say, that the NMFMA holds the grant, that's fine. But in terms of the work that's going to be conducted and the involvement, I see it really as I don't see it as an NMFMA project. It is a collective impact initiative. And, I think we'll all have to, and I ask all of you to hold us responsible to make sure that we don't, accidentally not message something right. I think that's my intent. That's the first. I hadn't even really, haven't really thought about it all that much. We've been head down, just really trying to move, figure out the pieces of onboarding the all of the partners and what the structure looks like, and those kind of foundational pieces. But I ask all of you to, hold the NMFMA to that. There is no, I think it is going to be a collective impact project, meaning it's everybody's work. As Elena has kept saying, we're reliant on everybody's contributions. So that's, I hope that answers that. I hadn't really, haven't thought about it a whole lot up until now, but I'm sure it will come up a lot as we look to things like, when we look for new resources to fund different aspects of the work. And I say we, I mean the big we. I don't mean the NMFMA. I mean the collective we. So I think those are things we'll all work on together. Does that help answer that, Helga? I'm going to try to take my hand down. And Kendall,
Yes.
I can say.
Well, it's an important question that I think if we address it from the very beginning can help us on that pathway to it. But you know, the second wave of that question is, how is the data shared and where is it going to and who has access to it? How is it going to be used? So, you know, just as we're in this process, to know that these are the questions that are popping up. So, you know, to help us build it correctly and equitably and inclusive, have that inclusive piece in it as well.
Go ahead.
It seems like that question of who's in, it sounds like a version of the question, who's in charge? And power flows with money a lot of times, right? Or vice versa. So somehow maybe what we're surfacing here is the need to just break that pattern. That just because the money comes from USDA, doesn't make USDA in charge, or flows through NMFMA doesn't make NMFMA in charge. And at the same time, we needed a way to get the money to get started, right? So that's like just a sort of a classic example of how caught we are in a system like that, just in order to approach it and want to change it. And I would just look, for me anyway, and again, just perspective, that's okay as long as we don't let it rule us. Right? The structure is what it is. It's delivered us something. We have an organization that's stepped up and taken that responsibility on our behalf, and let's not let it rule us.
And I feel as long as it is acknowledged, all of us here together have been doing this work and have had that impact already.
Yes.
The strength is in all of us. So I think that's the focus we're trying to make here and acknowledge that. Because again, we don't need that white savior approach, you know, to it. And I think that's being honest, being truthful. And like I said, we've tried to have these conversations and we've been not supported. We have not been, our attempts were taken or put back to us. Again, I'm talking about Agricultura Network as being territorial. And when our longevity has shown that that has not been it, because we've been working with other entities across the state for that long-term vision and goal of becoming self-sufficient food justice state, mission-driven with a collective impact approach. So those are the points that I'm trying to make here at the forefront. You know, let's acknowledge all that longevity that we all bring to this collective impact. And let's respect that as we now tackle those big pieces that have been challenging and through the collective impact have not been wanted to be addressed or have not provided that safe space for all of us to learn what equity really means, what privilege really means, what racism really means. So I feel that if we're going to be accountable to each other, accountable to the backbone that has been identified in this process, then these are just some of the statements that we need to start with. And I think Anita in the beginning started the main one. Do we have shared values? You know, are we assuming we're okay with our shared values? You know, there's questions that we came in here in good faith, but at the same time, dragging some really hard conversation that people weren't ready to have. I got to be honest about it.
Thanks, Helga, for being honest, being brave. That's hard. And we are working, I mean, I will just speak definitively here from the I believe we need to have an agreement on shared values that is transparent, that we can all see it and say, yep, that's, we agree to that moving forward. And yeah, so I will say that as Backbone team, that's something we've named from the beginning, a need to adopt. And I want to hand it over to Christina and then Alma, because they both raised their hands. But Christina, your hand went up first, probably in reaction to something about data, because I thought of you when Helga was talking about that. But yeah, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Elena, and I apologize for kind of shifting the conversation backwards, but just a product of the hand raising. For the data collection and data sharing, I mean, none of that's been decided. I mean, there's a draft of a data management plan, but the whole intent has always been to allow the collective to make decisions about the data, who it's shared, you know, the avenue that it's shared by, so everyone has equal access, and make decisions about, you know, how to get the word out about reporting and all that, you know, as part of the work that is going to be done within the evaluation team. And so it'll be a collective decision about, you know, all that. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. And I think that's on our agenda for tomorrow. We'll talk more about the data management plan. It sounds really flat, but it actually, Helga, you pretty much outlined it in your questions, like who has the data? What can it be used for? Is this shared by everyone? So yes, we will have that really important conversation tomorrow as well. And Alma, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I just first want to acknowledge the importance of this space and honor each one of the people that are part of this conversation. There is tremendous power in this space, tremendous transformative power here in this group. It's basically the food system leaders in New Mexico, and what we do from now on is really going to have an impact in our communities. It's going to have an impact at the state level in terms of policy, and it's also going to have an impact at the national levels in terms of developing alternatives, no, in terms of food justice, food accessibility, and other, you know, food considerations. So that's why I'm taking the space today. So I want to acknowledge that. And when I was thinking about equity and inclusion, I was thinking about this example of some white allies that were asking a teacher, her name is Loretta Ross, a very powerful civil rights and intersectional leader, Black woman. And they asked her, how can we help, you know, in the elections in North Carolina? And she's in Atlanta, I'm sorry. And she said, she came back, how can we help mobilize people of color? And she came back with this analysis of people of color were going to vote against Trump. It was a white woman who had the power to transform, you know, a system of oppression. And so I'm bringing that up, and especially she specifically mentioned the specific demographics, which were young white women who were a very powerful voting bloc. I'm mentioning this because when we're thinking about doing work to address racial inequalities, we don't need to do the work to uplift the voices of people of color, but we need to do some of the work of dismantling white racism and working with white communities to understand the inherent inequalities and injustices that exist, that are embedded in our food system. So we all have different tasks in terms of changing our food system and creating a new paradigm. We cannot resolve all the issues that we have at hand utilizing the same paradigms that created these problems in the first place. So I wanted to just kind of mention that from the very beginning. Now we'll come with a series of theories and a series of methodologies and a series of practices on how we do that work. I benefit immensely from the work that Mike has done, from the work that Steve has done, from the work of the NMFMA, from many people who have done great work to build processes and initiatives that build equity and capacity for all communities, and specifically for communities of color. So what I'm trying to say here is that perhaps we can develop a series of indicators that can help us measure which initiatives are supporting and uplifting and addressing inequalities, the inequalities of our food system. That way we avoid replicating some of these patterns in our practices, whether this is a program, whether it's a decision about funding, whether these are decisions on leadership. We'll have to be cognizant on how the decisions we make as a collective, but also the decisions that we make in our organizations, in our farm businesses, are really building or not equity or inequality. I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Alma. So I just want to pick up that piece, indicators and measurement, right? Data looks different ways. So that's going to be part of our conversations moving forward. There will be qualitative data, quantitative data, data rooted in are we meeting the objectives, but also process data. And again, that's why I'm excited to be part of this. And Alma, you just articulated the need for that so clearly, and how we can contribute not only to changing, our approach here in New Mexico, but collectively, hopefully making that impact at the national scale too. And I have no doubt this is the group of people that can do that. Pam, your thumb is up and your hand. Thank you.
I don't have the little blue hand, so I thought, well, maybe the thumb is the right thing. And also really want to say yes to everything that everybody has shared here. My question is, so many of us are involved. I mean, there's all these intersections inside this shared space and then beyond the shared space. And this is, and Helga, you said it earlier too, I mean, this is such an important time for us, and not just time, such an important time to be working on this. I'll say that for myself, I'm sure. So will there be, or I guess it would be really the decision of this group, the opportunity to be and to come to a way of, I want to say, sharing it out, but then building inward, sort of how do we weave the web even wider so that more people are a part of this value. I mean, we are a part of the value chain work, but those who are, but are not in the circle, can participate, learn, be part of it. I mean, I'm not even sure really quite how to say it, except that, and I don't want to land more on all of us and or on those who are taking responsibility to bring us together. It's more though that this is so valuable that it could really be, it could really help in many more ways, over time.
Thanks, Pam. I will address that given the time. So I do want to say two things. One, we are going to do some ecosystem mapping tomorrow. That's going to help us identify those intersectionality points where all of the work that we're all doing already, how they come together. Then that'll give us the ability to identify those leverage points for creating change, right? But first, we all have to see it and have that agreed upon understanding of the ecosystem that we're working in that context. And then the other piece is that comes to mind, and it's back at Kendall's point, sorry, the idea of how we communicate and how we brand this work is something that I would say out of this conversation has emerged as an immediate priority. So we're gonna take that with us and talk about how to address that, and so that you guys can see that's being acted upon. So a couple priorities that landed for me in this conversation were the need for naming shared values and having a process in which that we contribute and agree to that to be able to move forward. And that will be, yeah, that sounds simple, but I know it's not. And then the second piece is looking at how we are measuring our work, which is embedded already, but we know that there is going to be a little bit more work around that in terms of equity and impact and process. And then Pam, as you just said, what are those intersections and how can we make sure that that you feel like this project is a place where that's coming together? It's not an additional thing on your list, right? Like this is that shared space that we can utilize however we need. So we will address those. There's so many other things that were brought up. And I just want to really express gratitude for all of you for stepping up and for being brave to have that conversation in a very, frankly, not ideal setting, right? On a Zoom screen, in a short meeting, all those things. So thank you for all of you to contribute to it. And I'm gonna pass it off to Denise because we wanna be really cognizant of time. Actually, I see Phil's hand up too. So I'm gonna finish my sentence. We wanna be really cognizant of time and not hold any of you longer than meetings are. It's a commitment and we really respect the gift that you're giving us in it. So I'll hand it to Denise and to Phil, and thank you all.
Was that me first or you Denise?
Phil, take it away.
I was just gonna, real quick, I was just gonna say that in talking about equity work, I think it's also important, for me as a white man to acknowledge that, these systems were built to benefit people who look like me. And I think it's important to acknowledge that as step one towards deconstructing and dismantling those. And also to Anita's point in the chat about how that burden has historically fallen on people of color to do. And that's that's part of my work to do. So I just wanted to acknowledge that up front as well.
Thanks for sharing that. So yeah, obviously we have a lot more conversation to have around equity and around all of the topics that Elena, you just summarized as some of, I think, the key takeaways from today. I have a clarification question for Elena to start with, because on our agenda, we had said that the office hours were today also from 3 to 4. And so I don't know if that's, unless I'm looking at the wrong day, but so I wanted to clarify, are we also offering out, I'm happy to be here today from 3 to 4, but I don't know if it works for the rest of, so.
I'm happy to offer it. I'll be on at 3. Yeah, if anyone, you sit with it and you feel like you have some thoughts to bring back to contribute to tomorrow, let us know. Otherwise, yes, Denise, that's me not being perfect. So it actually was a note for tomorrow from 3 to 4 directly following our call, but we are going to come together anyway. So please join us if you'd like to. I will send it via the Google Calendar. I didn't want to send the open office hours to you guys before we announced it so that you didn't feel like you had to accept it. So I'll put it on our invites now so that you all have it for today and tomorrow.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. And as far as Slack, I will go ahead and invite everybody to, and I am certainly not as skilled at Slack as I hope to be, but I have a basic knowledge. And so I will invite everyone to the platform and then we'll go from there. But at least you will have a Slack invite, and then you can direct message each other. It will give you the opportunity. The support team has already, I think almost all of the support team has already joined Slack. The backbone team is on Slack. Now I'll send out an invite to everyone else to add you onto Slack as well. You'll have to add yourself on. And as Elena mentioned, we will have training on that, but you can play around and it's pretty easy to get a very basic understanding of how to use it. And so tomorrow, I just want to go over, tomorrow we're going to meet from 12 to 3 p.m. We were trying to accommodate as many schedules as possible, which is just really difficult with this large of a group. And tomorrow's meeting goal, and this is all in the agenda, Elena is very good about always having, this is another process thing, but she has the links embedded in all of the Zoom invites. You'll always find the meeting agenda, and you will also have access to a full folder that will have all of the documents, so you don't have to try to take screenshots or, you know, copy information. All of anything that's presented you will have access to. But tomorrow's goal is really to start to break into teams, to asset map and to look what our ecosystems look like, if there are people who are missing, people or organizations, not just people, but it's not an issue asset map, it's an organization / human asset mapping. And so that's really the key goal for tomorrow. And with that, I think I really just want to acknowledge, you know, that we truly appreciate everyone's time today, going forward, showing up in all the ways that we are trying to be there for each other. There's very important conversations that, you know, I hope this, and again, I'm speaking as the I here, but that this collective impact framework will allow us to move things forward where we may have been stuck. It is all about going forward, and really just appreciate everyone's time and energy for being here with us. And if you miss any meetings, either these or other meetings will always be recorded. There won't so much be notes from, there might be some notes along with the meeting. This one maybe won't have as many notes, but there will usually be meeting notes. So when you miss a meeting, you can catch up. We know everybody's got really busy schedules. So thank you all for being here today. I don't know if any of the other Backbone team members have any last thoughts, but we'll also be on Zoom today from 3 to 4. So thanks.
Thanks, Denise. And just to address the question in the Slack, we will send the video recording, or in the Slack, in the chat. We'll send the video recording via Slack. So that could be your first action when you get invited, is to try to access that. We'll also send it on email in case you don't know Slack, but I think you'll see it's rather user-friendly. And they're coming to you via YouTube so that the cloud storage isn't such a problem. So there will be a place where you can see them all in a very organized way. So don't feel like you have to keep them or anything like that. All right, thank you all. I hope you have a chance to get outside, and thank you all for being here today. Again, we are so appreciative of all of you, and this work is emergent and we are defining it as we go. And I'm just personally grateful to be in this circle with all of you moving forward in this work. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Michael.